Okay. So welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston. We are now starting our Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class. So I'll begin as always with a chant. Om Sarva Jiva Papanasha Karanam Bhaveshwaram Swikritang Garbhavasa Deha Pashamidrisham Yapitam Swalilaya Jayena Divya Jivanam Yapitam Swalilaya Jayena Divya Jivanam Tannamami Deva Deva Ramakrishnam Ishwaram. Om Shri Vivekanandari Satchishya Supujitaya Shri Sharada Devya Virata Sevitaya Shri Ramakrishna Paramahamsaya Avatara Varishtaya Chate Namah. Om Tava Katamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravana Mangalam Shri Maratatam Bhuvi Grinandiye Bhuridajana. So we are continuing today, March 11th, 1883, which was Sri Ramakrishna's birthday that year, the Tithi Puja, as we observe it nowadays. So his birthday according to the Bengali calendar. And we are in the middle of page 189 according to the New York edition. So he had just gone into ecstasy as he was talking with the devotees. After a long time, he returned to the normal consciousness of the world. He drew a long breath and repeatedly chanted the name of Rama, every word showering nectar into the hearts of the devotees. The master sat down, the others seating themselves around him. So now here we should not take this to be poetry, that it says that with every word, Ram, 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 as Sri Ramakrishna said it, that with every word it showered nectar on the devotees. That might be taken just as nice poetry, that it was a nice atmosphere and everybody felt happy and everything, but no, that actually was the experience of those, that the word itself, as he said it, because for Sri Ramakrishna the name was awakened. It was not just RAM. It was an awakened mantra, an awakened name, fully in his consciousness. So we can see this from examples in the literature. For instance, when Swami Brahmananda was in Vrindavan, he was sitting during some kirtan close to a Vaishnava Babaji, a holy man. And the holy man was doing his beads. And every now and then the holy man would reach over and touch Swami Brahmananda's head with his beads. And Swami Brahmananda felt a thrill through his whole body. So that wasn't poetry, that was a spiritual experience, feeling the power of the name which this Babaji had said so many times with great devotion on his mala, on his beads. And so that touching Swami Brahmananda on the head, Swami Brahmananda felt the power of the name coming from the mala itself. And there are many other stories which show that for a sage like Sri Ramakrishna, even for lesser saints than Sri Ramakrishna, when the mantra is awakened, then their uttering of the name has tremendous power. So when Sri Ramakrishna said it, he said it with the full awakening that he himself had. So it undoubtedly, literally showered nectar into the hearts of the devotees. Master to the devotees. Ordinary people do not recognize the advent of an incarnation of God. He comes in secret. Only a few of his intimate disciples can recognize him. That Rama was both Brahman and Absolute and a perfect incarnation of God in human form was known only to 12 rishis. The other sages said to him, Rama, we know you only as Dasharatha's son. So again, this discussion comes in the context where he was telling Kedar, one of the devotees present, about how the rishis had not recognized, many of the rishis had not recognized Rama or his being an incarnation of God, being a form of God, because they were devoted to Brahman, the Absolute. They weren't interested in a relationship with God. They weren't interested in forms of God. They weren't interested in the possibility of the incarnation of God. So they saw Ram just as a human being. So it was in that context that Sri Ramakrishna had gone into ecstasy, and now he's continuing this discussion about Rama, that Rama was a full incarnation of God, and that ordinary people don't recognize such, and that you see with Sri Ramakrishna. To us, it seems obvious now that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation when we study his life, when we read his words, when we have studied the lives of Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda and direct disciples. But we have all of that in the background, plus a 140-year tradition of looking on Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation. But the people who came to him in his lifetime, even in his later lifetime when he was at Dakshineshwar, after disciples had started coming to him, many of them also didn't recognize him. Shivanath Shastri and other such people who were members of the Brahmo Samaj, they didn't recognize him. Shivanath Shastri, whom Sri Ramakrishna loved very much, he said that Sri Ramakrishna became unconscious because he thought too much about God. And so they didn't really understand who he was. So it's not surprising, therefore, that many of the rishis also didn't understand who Sri Ram was. They understood the idea of the Absolute, but not the idea of the incarnation of God. Can everyone comprehend Brahman, the indivisible existence, knowledge, bliss absolute, that is Satchidananda? He alone has attained perfect love of God, who, having reached to the Absolute, having reached to Satchidananda, keeps himself in the realm of the relative in order to enjoy the divine Leela. A man can describe the ways and activities of the Queen, that is, at that time, Queen Victoria, if he has previously visited her in England. Only then will his description of the Queen be correct. Sages like Bharadwaja adored Ram and said, O Rama, you are nothing but the indivisible Satchidananda. You have appeared before us as a human being, but you look like a man because you have shrouded yourself with your own Maya. These rishis were great devotees of Rama and had supreme love for God. So again, can everyone comprehend Brahman? That the idea of Brahman, we can grasp something of it intellectually, but that's just a concept. But again, to see the incarnation, as Sri Ramakrishna said previously, and what we went over in another class, said to see the incarnation is to see God itself, himself, herself, itself. And so that which to most of us is an abstraction, Brahman, the absolute existence, consciousness, bliss. Existence is a word, consciousness is a word, bliss is a word, and we only have some sort of vague conceptual understanding of what the words mean in terms of our present experience. So to understand what absolute existence, knowledge absolute, bliss absolute, beyond time, space, causation, what that means, that's beyond us. but we can see the incarnation. And so if we hear that God is love, what to speak of Brahman, but if we come to Ishvara, we come to God, and we hear that God is love, well, that also is a word that we only understand in terms of our present experience. But if we were in the company of an incarnation of God, then we would see what love really means. That's what all of the disciples said about Sri Ramakrishna, that the love they received from him was unlike the love even they had from their own parents, even their own mother, that this was a completely different quality of love that they experienced from Sri Ramakrishna. So, can everyone comprehend Brahman? He alone has attained perfect love of God, who, having reached the absolute, keeps himself in the realm of the relative in order to enjoy the divine Leela. So this was Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. The traditional idea of Advaita, non-dualism, was you attain to the absolute and then you remain absorbed in the absolute. And that was the end of the story. You've attained to liberation and you remain there as long as the body lasts. And then you merge into Brahman, you are Brahman, you know you're Brahman, and the body drops off, and that's the end of the story. But Sri Ramakrishna used to say that no, after the attainment, even after the attainment of the highest Advaitic knowledge, then when you come back and see this world, then enter into a loving relationship with God, whom now you know yourself to be united with. Now you know that you and God are the same reality, just the two poles of one experience. And then you enter into a loving relationship and enjoy the Leela of God. He said that that was the best end to a spiritual life. A man can describe the ways and activities of the Queen, what we read already, if he has previously visited her in England. And so only if you've seen the Queen can you really speak about the Queen with knowledge. Otherwise, you're speaking from books, secondhand knowledge. And so if we've seen God, then when we come back to this realm, then when we talk to others about God, or people who have done that, who have experienced, realized God, and then come back to this realm and speak about their experience, then their words have great power, far more power than our words have. That sages like Bharadwaja, he was one of those 12 rishis who knew Rama to be an incarnation of God. And so Sri Ramakrishna quotes him here. He continues with narration. Presently, some devotees from Konnagar arrived, singing kirtan to the accompaniment of drums and cymbals. For those of you not familiar with the Calcutta area, Konnagar is on the other side of the Ganges from Dakshineshwar, north of where Bellarmat is. So it's across from Dakshineshwar on the other bank. So some devotees from Konnagar had arrived, singing kirtan to the accompaniment of drums and cymbals. As they reached the northeast veranda of Sri Ramakrishna's room, the master joined in the music, dancing with them, intoxicated with divine joy. So the northeast veranda means the veranda which was facing the Kuti, where Rani Rasmani and Mathur Babu had lived, and where Sri Ramakrishna had lived for many, many years before moving into his later room. Now and then he went into samadhi, standing still as a statue. While he was in one of these states of divine unconsciousness, the devotees put thick garlands of jasmine around his neck. The enchanting form of the master reminded the devotees of Sri Chaitanya, another incarnation of God. The master passed through 3 moods of divine consciousness. The inmost, when he completely lost all knowledge of the outer world. The semi-conscious, when he danced with the devotees in an ecstasy of love. And the conscious, when he joined them in loud singing. It was indeed a sight for the gods to see the master standing motionless in samadhi with fragrant garlands hanging from his neck, his countenance beaming with love, and the devotees singing and dancing around him. So there's only one thing in here that I wanted to look up in the Bengali before I came to class this morning, but I got distracted and didn't get around to it. And that is, it says in the middle of the paragraph, while he was in one of these states of divine unconsciousness. Now, I wonder what the Bengali says, because that seems like a very poor choice of words. Divine unconsciousness. It is in a state of divine absorption. Divine unconsciousness refers that there was no consciousness there. No, what it means, whatever M said in the original Bengali, I don't know, but he certainly meant and may have said in the Bengali that he was in a state of absorption where he was unconscious of the outer world, but fully conscious inwardly. So that's not a state.
Semi-conscious, not unconscious.
Oh, here it's, oh no, that's later. Further up in the paragraph, this divine unconsciousness. So it's not a state where there's any unconsciousness at all. There's just the non-awareness of the outer world, but intense, heightened awareness inwardly. Just the world has disappeared, but the consciousness is much more intense than our present consciousness. The awareness much more awake than our present consciousness. So there's nothing unconscious about it, except that it looks that way from our standpoint, because we don't see the usual signs of registering the outer world, engaging with the outer world. So again, the enchanting form of the Master M says, reminded the devotees of the beautiful form of Sri Chaitanya when he would be immersed in kirtan with the devotees. And then he describes the three states that he would pass through repeatedly during the course of the kirtan. One where he was again so absorbed in divine consciousness that he let me see. Antardasha. Yeah. So that's quite different from divine unconsciousness. Yes, that's not at all the same. He goes through these three stages of antardasha, complete unawareness of the outer world, where he's inwardly fully awake. Of course, even that, in using words, there are always problems, no matter what words we use. So even to say that inwardly he's aware and outwardly unaware, there's no inward and outward. Inward and outward have disappeared, and only this divine awareness is there. This has all disappeared. It's not that it's out there. So even there's a problem with words, but it's a much better description than what the divine unconsciousness says. And then he would be in a state where he would be able to dance, but still he wasn't able to engage with others. Just he was so absorbed in ecstasy, an ecstatic state, rather than an antardasha state, internal state. He was able to dance, to operate his body, but not able to engage with others. And then he would come to the third state, where he was aware enough of body surroundings in control of his faculties enough to be able to join in the singing. So one moment he would be singing in ecstasy, and of course everyone who knew Sri Ramakrishna said that his singing was extraordinary. His singing was the most beautiful singing they had ever heard. People who knew Swamiji but didn't know Sri Ramakrishna said Swamiji's voice was the most beautiful voice they had ever heard, his singing voice and even his speaking voice. But those who knew both Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji said, yes, Swamiji had an extraordinarily beautiful voice, but no one had a voice like Sri Ramakrishna. So in one state, Sri Ramakrishna is singing in his beautiful voice, and singing at the full power of his voice. And then he goes further into ecstasy, and all he can do is dance. He can no longer sing. And then he remains completely motionless in a state of samadhi, completely unaware of the outer world. And in reality, the outer world had disappeared. Not that the outer world was still there waiting for him and he was somewhere else. No, this had all dissolved into pure consciousness. So it was indeed a sight for the gods to see the Master standing motionless in samadhi with fragrant garlands hanging from his neck, his countenance beaming with love, and the devotees singing and dancing around him. So one thing we always have to remember when reading passages like this, which the gospel is full of course, because it was a daily phenomenon with Sri Ramakrishna, multiple times a day, is that when he was in that state, and when M says it was a divine sight to see him, it's not something that could be reproduced in a movie. Someday, there have been movies made of Sri Ramakrishna. I haven't seen any that I really liked yet. But someday there will be a good movie of Sri Ramakrishna, like have been made of other great people, including spiritual people. But that won't be captured, because to see Sri Ramakrishna again, you were there in his presence, and there was this extraordinary atmosphere that was created because of the intensity of his mood and because of his spiritual power, which radiated out to all who were present. So it's like being in an electric field where suddenly you feel that all of the hair on your body is standing on end. You feel an electric current passing through, but a blissful electric current, a current where you feel that your whole being has become unified and concentrated and purified. There's again a powerful spiritual atmosphere which was present. So you can have a good actor presenting Sri Ramakrishna. You can show him dancing in ecstasy. You can show him still in samadhi and everything, and that'll be nice. It'll be nice to see if it's done well. But that we won't get. That we won't get. The atmosphere that he created because of the state of his mind, which changed the whole atmosphere around him and far beyond him. So that we have to remember, that when he says that it was a beautiful sight, it wasn't just a sight. Again, he has to express it in words, and so you have to use words that people can understand. But it was not just a sight. It was participating in the ecstatic state that Sri Ramakrishna was in. Like the incident at Belar Mutt when Swami Vivekananda was talking to his disciples and talking to them about the nature of Brahman and everything. And then suddenly he says, see, the palpable Brahman. Can't you see? Can't you see? And suddenly everyone was plunged into profound meditation because of the power of Swamiji. Swamiji was seeing the reality of Brahman everywhere, inside, outside, no outside, just Brahman. And so Swamiji saying, see, can't you see? Then his seeing, because of the power of his personality, it lifted everyone's mind up. And many examples in people who gave their reminiscences of Swamiji. When they would be listening to a lecture of his, they would be transported. Josephine MacLeod said in the first talk she ever heard of Swamiji's at a class in the winter of 1895 in New York, she said that when the Swami began speaking, the whole world disappeared. And later she said, this is not in her reminiscences, published reminiscences, she said in the reminiscences that the particular words he spoke, I don't remember. But she said in a letter to her niece, she said that the whole universe disappeared into an ocean of light as Swamiji was speaking. So Swamiji lifted her up to a point where she saw the intent behind Swamiji's words. She couldn't even hear the words, but she saw that which Swamiji was speaking about. Lillian Montgomery talks about the same effect of Swamiji's speech or classes. When it was time for his noon meal, Sri Ramakrishna put on a new yellow cloth and sat on the small couch. His golden complexion, blending with his yellow cloth, enchanted the eyes of the devotees. So you remember Sri Ramakrishna, when he was younger, he had such a spiritual glow about him that his complexion became golden, so that it was said that the golden amulet that he wore on his arm, which would have contained the mantra of his Ishta, Kali, that the golden amulet and his skin, they seemed to blend together because there was such a luminosity about his person. And Sri Ramakrishna noticed that everyone was looking at him in amazement at the beauty of his luminous form. And so he began to say, no, go inside, go inside, go inside, go inside. I don't want this physical beauty. Let the beauty be inside, not outside for people's eyes to see. But again, when he was in a state of ecstasy, again that luminosity would come to him. And so he seemed to blend with the color of his yellow cloth. After his meal, Sri Ramakrishna rested a little on the small couch. Inside and outside his room crowded the devotees, among them Kedar, Suresh, Ram, Manomohan, Girindra, Rakal, Bhavanath, and M. Rakal's father was also present. So the small couch means, again, in his room. You've at least seen pictures of his room, and some of you have been there. There's the large couch on which he would sleep, and then the smaller couch, just a little narrower and a little lower, which was right in front of it. He would sit on this couch and talk to the devotees who were sitting on the floor, Indian style. Nowadays in India, you find chairs everywhere and tables everywhere, but in those days you didn't find that. Life was extremely simple. And so he would be seated on this. So on that couch is the one that he's seated on, and or he rested on the little couch. And then it talks about the people who were present. So Rakal's father was very upset when Rakal started going to Sri Ramakrishna and saw that Sri Ramakrishna was having a great effect on Rakal's mind, turning it away from worldly matters. And so his father came to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna treated him so respectfully and so ceremoniously that the father was completely won over. So we find now that he's so won over that he had even come for Sri Ramakrishna's birthday celebration. As far as I know, he never became an actual devotee, but Sri Ramakrishna was able to win him over. And that I used to see with the old Swamis in particular. It happens with some younger Swamis too, but it was very notable with the old Swamis. Those that were for me were old Swamis. Now I'm an old Swami. But when I was young, those who were the old Swamis, which meant the disciples of the direct disciples and of Holy Mother, that when the parents of a monk would come, they were treated so well and treated so lovingly. For one thing, they realized that the loss of their son to family life was a great shock to many of them. And so out of sympathy with the suffering that their son's leaving home had put them through, that was part of it. Another part of it was for the welfare of the one who had become the monk, so that the parents would feel that, no, my son has come to a good place, and so that they would feel happy about where their child had come. And so it was something that was wonderful to see, the way that the old monks would treat the parents of of someone who had come to join the order, or who had already joined and was already established there. Either way.
They gave their children such sanskar that they became known.
Yes, and also as a recognition that a child who becomes a monk, much credit goes to the parents because of that. Because without good parents, even if outwardly you can find fault with the parents, like Rakal's father and people like that, but there was something that was tremendously good there that allowed the child to want to become a monk and to come to a spiritual life. And so recognition of that also, as Surin says, that also is very true. A Vaishnava Goswami was seated in the room. The master said to him, "Well, what do you say? What is the way?" The Goswami. So Goswami, they are family lines of people going back to the time of Sri Chaitanya, and they are highly respected in the Bengal Vaishnava tradition. Our own Swami Swahananda, in his pre-monastic life, was in a Goswami lineage. He was from a Goswami family. So again, Sri Ramakrishna asks this Vaishnava Goswami, what do you say? What is the way? Goswami: "Sir, the chanting of God's name is enough. The scriptures emphasize the sanctity of God's name for the Kali Yuga." So that's a typical Bengal Vaishnava teaching. Especially, there are many types of Vaishnavas, but among the Bengal Vaishnavas in particular, the repetition of the name is considered the supreme practice, the likes of which there is no other practice. In fact, I don't know if it's still there, but it used to be if you would do a search on a Google search on the internet for Lennon, Harrison, George Harrison, John Lennon, Prabhupada, that is the Prabhupada of the ISKCON, founder of ISKCON, then you would find a discussion where John Lennon, George Harrison, and Prabhupada were speaking. And Prabhupada said that there's no need, meditation in the present age is not possible. Just chant Krishna's name, that's the only practice which is needed for salvation. And either Harrison or Lennon, I forget which one, says, but that's not what Swami Vivekananda said. Swami Vivekananda said that we should practice meditation. And then Prabhupada, they argue a little bit back and forth, and then they finally just dropped the discussion. Anyway, it was an interesting discussion to see that the Beatles were bringing up Swami Vivekananda. I didn't know at that time that they even knew who he was. But again, the idea is that there's nothing like the repetition of the name of God. And so there's that famous Vaishnava saying, Bengal Vaishnava saying, that Name Ruchi, Jive Doya, Name Ruchi, Vaishnav Seva. That Jive Doya, compassion for living beings, is the first principle. Second principle, Name Ruchi, delight in the name of God, and Vaishnav Seva, service to other devotees, of the other Vaishnavas. That those are the three basic principles of Vaishnava practice, Bengal Vaishnava practice. And so naturally the Goswami is going to say that the chanting of God's name is sufficient. So, Master, yes, there is no doubt about the sanctity of God's name, but can a mere name achieve anything without the yearning love of the devotee behind it? One should feel great restlessness of soul for the vision of God. Suppose a man repeats the name of God mechanically while his mind is absorbed in woman and gold. Can he achieve anything? Mere muttering of magic words doesn't cure one of the pain of a spider or scorpion sting. One must also apply the smoke of burning cow dung. So this was a village cure remedy for the sting of a scorpion. You chant a particular mantra made for a scorpion sting, and you apply the smoke of cow dung, and that was supposed to heal the sting of the scorpion. I haven't tried it, so I can't say it doesn't work, but it would certainly be interesting if it does work. But the intent of Sri Ramakrishna's words is not recommending a particular village remedy for scorpion, but it's to say that just repeating the mantra for the scorpion sting isn't enough. You have to apply the proper medicine as well. And so just repeating the name of God mechanically is not enough. Now, when that's all that we can do, that we should do. If that's all we can do, then do it mechanically. That's okay. Go ahead and do it mechanically. With the idea that with time, let me try to do it with more and more devotion and love. And so Holy Mother used to tell her disciples who were concerned that their japa was purely mechanical. They couldn't go beyond that. She said, well, it doesn't matter whether you're pushed into the water or you jump into the water. Either way, you get wet. So just go on doing the mantra. That's enough. That's enough because that's all we can do. But once we can do more, we need to do more, because as Sri Ramakrishna, and that's what the intent of Sri Ramakrishna's teaching the Vaishnava. He wasn't, as we'll see in a moment, he wasn't criticizing the power of the name, but he was saying that this old idea that the name is so powerful that it doesn't matter what you do, and the example of Ajamila is coming, that you just repeat the name of God and everything will be fine. No. That whatever our spiritual practice, even in japa, we eventually have to imbue that with devotion. We have to become conscious of what we're doing, and we have to repeat the name with love and with devotion, and then it will begin to take effect. Before then, yes, just do it mechanically if that's all that we can do. And that's all that all of us start with, unless you're born a saint like Sri Ramakrishna. All of us start just with mechanical practice. But when we can, gradually we have to apply more. So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to get him out of that rut that many people are in, thinking that, well, I repeat the name of God, that's all I need. I'm saved because I repeated God's name. No, that's not enough. So Goswami objects and says, but what about Ajamila then? Ajamila was a person who was a great sinner who had a son named Narayan. And when he was on death's door, he cried out for Narayan, his son, and then he died. But because he had said Narayan, the name of God, it said that Yama came to take his soul, but from Vaikuntha, Vishnu's messengers came to take him up to Vaikuntha, that he was saved because he had said Narayana. So that's a story which is told in order to inspire people with the power of the name. It's called Arthavada, eulogy. It doesn't mean it literally, and that's what Sri Ramakrishna was not the type to do what I'm doing now and say that the story was only eulogy, don't take it so seriously. No, he would leave the story intact, but say that there's more to it than that. So eulogy means it's said in order to infuse faith into the devotee that the name of God is tremendously powerful. And so therefore you should say it. The meaning of it is not do whatever you want in life, and at the last moment you call your son, whose name happens to be Narayana or Krishna or Ram, not even thinking of the actual deity, but just thinking of your son, and suddenly you're going to be saved from a whole life full of evil. No, that spirituality is not so cheap. So the master says, perhaps Ajamila had done many spiritual things in his past births. So again, Sri Ramakrishna's way was not to say that's ridiculous. He leaves the story of Ajamila intact to do what it was meant to do, to inspire people. But he says, it is also said that he once practiced austerity. Besides, those were the last moments of his life when he called to his son Narayan. What is the use of giving an elephant a bath? It will cover itself with dirt and dust again and become its former self. But if someone removes the dust from its body and gives it a bath just before it enters the stable, then the elephant remains clean. So again, the idea is that Ajamila uttered Narayana just before the moment of his death. He said Narayana and then he died. And so the power of the name took its effect because that was the last thing that he said. Suppose a man becomes pure by chanting the holy name of God, but immediately afterwards commits many sins. And of course, there's that beautiful story of Sri Ramakrishna of the thieves who were doing their beads and chanting the name of Gopala, Gopala, which was a code word for this man who's come into our shop. He's as stupid as a cowherd. And Hara Hara, the name of Shiva means steal from him, and so forth. And Hari Hari, I have stolen, I've already taken it from him. And so every word of God had a code meaning that was helping them to steal from unsuspecting customers. So like that, he says, suppose a man becomes pure by chanting the holy name of God, but immediately afterwards commits many sins. He has no strength of mind. He doesn't take a vow not to repeat his sin. A bath in the Ganges undoubtedly absolves one of all sins, but what does that avail? They say that the sins perch on the trees along the bank of the Ganges. No sooner does the man come back from the holy waters than the old sins jump on his shoulders from the trees. All laugh. The same old sins take possession of him again. He is hardly out of the water before they fall upon him. And so, yes, that's the idea. That's what he's saying about the story of Ajamila. That shouldn't be used to indicate that all I need to do is say the name of God, and then I can do whatever I like, because the name is so powerful that Ajamila, even not knowing what he was saying, thinking he was just calling his son, that it saved him from a lifetime of evil action. No, it won't do that. He says he has no strength of mind. He doesn't take a vow not to repeat his sins. So Sri Ramakrishna said, it doesn't matter what you have done, even murder, even something the most heinous of sins. It doesn't matter what you have done. If you sincerely repent for it, you pray to God saying that I'm sorry for what I have done. I promise I will never do that again. You take a vow before God that I will never do that again. Please forgive me. then even such things can be forgiven. Even the greatest of sins are forgiven. But it takes that. It takes recognition of what I've done, deep, deep repentance for what I've done, and the vow that, Lord, I will never do this again. I will never do it again. Then we are freed from that. But just, again, the story of Ajamila shouldn't be used to excuse things where Ajamila wasn't even sorry for what he had done. Therefore I say, chant the name of God, and with it pray to him that you may have love for him. Pray to God that your attachment to such transitory things as wealth, name, and creature comforts may become less and less every day. So yes, therefore I say, chant the name of God, and with it pray to him. So as we chant the name of God, as we do japa, as we do repeat our mantra, let us remember that start with mechanical repetition. That's okay. That's all any of us can do in the early stages of japa. And the early stages means for years we keep lapsing into mechanical repetition. Sometimes we come out of it and then we lapse back into it. That's okay. Do at least that. But know that as I'm doing the mechanical repetition, let me, as soon as I can, as often as I can remember, let me pull myself back to awareness of what I'm doing, that I'm repeating the name of God. And that Nam Nami Abhed, as Holy Mother used to say, that the name and the one named are the same. So if I'm repeating the name of God, I'm invoking the very presence of God with every repetition. The presence of God is there in the repetition. And so let me try to be aware of that, the holiness of what I'm doing, and let it inspire devotion, that I've been given something so sacred that it can take me across, this itself can take me across the ocean of samsara. So as I begin to develop devotion for the name, then I begin little by little to be able to remember more and more often from time to time as I'm reciting it, what it is that I'm reciting. And one of the values of japa is that if you've developed at least mechanical repetition, then that keeps going on. And so it tends to keep pulling your mind back. Your mind wanders away, you're thinking about other things, but then the repetition is going on, and then suddenly, because it's still going on, it pulls you back to itself. And then you think again that, oh yes, what am I doing? I'm repeating your name, and you are present in the name. And so you spend a few moments like that, and then again the mind wanders away, but it keeps pulling you back. So therefore I say, chant the name of God, and with it pray to him that you may have love for him. To the Goswami, with sincerity and earnestness one can realize God through all religions. The Vaishnavas will realize God, and so will the Shaktas, the Vedantists, and the Brahmos. The Muslims and Christians will realize him too. All will certainly realize God if they are earnest and sincere. So that, of course, is Sri Ramakrishna's standard teaching. But there's a meaning of his saying it here. He's telling it to the Goswami because among the different sects in India, Sri Ramakrishna himself was from a Vaishnava family and had great love for the Vaishnava traditions. But he also recognized that the Vaishnavas were a tradition which had a tendency towards narrowness. And so he's specifically telling the Goswami this. There are other people who are present, but he's telling the Goswami that all religions are true, that one can realize God through all religions. Because of all the people there, certainly he needed most to hear it, because of that idea that Krishna is the only way, Vaishnavism is the only way, that other paths are lower paths. Just some of my own experience in that field. There are devotees, not Ramakrishna devotees, but Hindu devotees in Encinitas, California, where I used to go to give talks once a month for a number of years. Very wonderful devotees. I still have contact with them. And the wife in the family, the mother of the family, I knew her and her mother also, who lived with the family. She told me once that her family, her mother and parents, her tradition, they were from South India. They were mother worshippers. They were Shaktas. And so when she married her husband, whom I knew, they were Vaishnavas living near Mumbai, or I think in Mumbai. And so when she got married, her father-in-law told her, "But now you come from a family worshiping the Divine Mother. That's very good. That's fine. Lakshmi is the Divine Mother. That's good. But now you've come to a Vaishnava family, and so now you should begin to follow the real religion, the true religion. And you should take up the worship of Sri Krishna because he's the real God." And so that was her introduction to Vaishnavism. And then when I used to live in San Diego, as many of you know, for many years. And there I became close to various spiritual groups. I communed with various spiritual groups, kept close contact with them, good association with Self-Realization Fellowship, with Chinmoy Mission, and among others also with the ISKCON in San Diego. I knew some of the leaders of ISKCON also. And so I was invited, because I knew them and had a good relationship with them, they invited me to the 25th anniversary of the founding of ISKCON. It was a worldwide celebration, but they were having a big celebration in San Diego, where one of the leaders of ISKCON lived. And so I was invited there, and there was a Hari Om Sharan, who was a famous, he may still be singing, I don't know, a famous Hindi bhajan singer. So he was invited, and I used to listen to his records at Mayavati. We would play his records, LPs on the old record player at Mayavati back in the 70s when I was there. So I knew of him and had liked his singing. So I was happy to know that he was going to be there. I'd never met him. So I met him and met his wife also, who was from Guyana. And so he started singing during the celebration. I was seated at the table of honor for honored guests. And so enjoyed about 45 minutes of his singing beautiful songs to Krishna and Radha, and a wonderful bhajan. So then after 45 minutes, after one of the songs, he said, "Well, now I've been singing for 45 minutes now, songs to Sri Krishna and Sri Radha. Now let us take a break and now sing a few bhajans to Shiva." And suddenly this leader of ISKCON, he stood up quickly and ran to the microphone to save the situation. And so he took the microphone and said, "So we have been enjoying Hari Om Sharan's bhajan so much. Wonderful to hear his wonderful singing of the glories of Sri Krishna and Sri Radha. And now he says he would like to sing a few songs to Shiva. And that is all right, because Shiva was the greatest of the devotees of Sri Krishna." And so now... So somehow to save the situation, so that people don't think that Shiva was on the same standing as Sri Krishna, so to make him a great devotee of Sri Krishna. So no offense to ISKCON and devotees of ISKCON, because not all followers are like that. I was recently at a retreat center of ISKCON in India, and loved my experience there and loved the people there, including Radhanath Swami, who's very, very liberal and open. In fact, he came to ISKCON through Shiva, through his prayer to Vishwanath Shiva in Kashi. It was the prayer that Shiva answered at the time of his praying to Shiva, that he was taken to, he found his way, a mysterious set of circumstances that led him to ISKCON. So he, because of his very background, he's very liberal, from an American Jewish family to an Indian sadhu who was devoted to every deity and then finding his way to ISKCON. So again, no insult meant to ISKCON, but it was for this reason that Sri Ramakrishna was addressing these words to the Goswami, because of that tendency. So he goes on, "Some people indulge in quarrels, saying one cannot attain anything unless one worships our Krishna, or nothing can be gained without the worship of Kali, our Divine Mother, or one cannot be saved without accepting the Christian religion. This is pure dogmatism. The dogmatist says, my religion alone is true and the religions of others are false. This is a bad attitude. God can be reached by different paths. Further, some say that God has form and is not formless. Thus, they start quarreling. A Vaishnava quarrels with a Vedantist. So yes, there's some who say that God has form and that the formless reality is a lower thing, and others who say that the formless reality is true and that God cannot take form. And so Sri Ramakrishna always said, remember that God has form, God is without form, and God is beyond both that which has form and that which is without form. Beyond both. It manifests as both and is beyond both. One can rightly speak of God only after one has seen him. He who has seen God knows really and truly that God has form and that he is formless as well. He has many other aspects that cannot be described. Once some blind men chanced to come near an animal that someone told them was an elephant. They were asked what the elephant was like. The blind men began to feel its body. One of them said the elephant was like a pillar. He had touched only its leg. Another said it was like a winnowing fan. He had touched only its ear. In this way, the others, having touched its tail or belly, gave their different versions of the elephant. Just so, a man who has seen only one aspect of God limits God to that alone. It is his conviction that God cannot be anything else. So we will stop here for today and continue here next time. So let me make announcements and then a final prayer. On Saturday, there's a special program actually starting Friday. Let's see, Saturday is the 2nd, yes. So starting on Friday night at 7 o'clock Central Time, there is a Call to Unite, a special internet program, which you can find out more about if you go to the website unite.us. So it goes for 24 hours in terms of Houston time from 7 p.m. on Friday to 7 p.m. on Saturday. It's based on Greenwich Mean Time, where it's midnight to midnight on May 2nd. But that translates in that way to Central Time in Texas. So there'll be many famous people and some very unfamous people on the program. It's a call to unite in the face of the pandemic, to support those who are frontline workers during the emergency, to support those who are ill, to support those who have friends and family who are ill, and to bring people together in a show of unity in the face of the difficulties that many people are facing, to give encouragement, to give support, etc. And so we invite all of you to be a part of that by participating. Go to unite.us, and there's a button where you click and you register. And there's no cost to it. There's no obligation. All it means is that they will keep you informed of how to view the program through Facebook, through YouTube, through Zoom, through Hulu, etc., Twitter, etc. So then on Sunday, I still haven't come up with a title for the talk, but the subject will be fear and how to overcome it. And then next week we'll have the usual classes, all for now live streamed. Tuesday, Gita class at 7:30. Thursday, this class at 11 o'clock. So I'll give a closing chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamah. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat.